I've touched upon these topics before, and I want to talk about how to move out of victimization and into self-responsibility, and out of the analytical mind into the compassionate heart, and really creating actually the equanimity and harmony between our left and right brain as a way to drop into our heart. And how I feel if we move in this direction, how profoundly it changes our state of being, but actually how it gives us the true power to change the world, in my opinion. So that's what we're going to talk about today. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. I was listening to a really lovely conversation between Pam Gregory and Heather Ensworth, I think is how you pronounce it. And it was just this really beautiful, esoteric, but really grounded conversation. And they speak a lot about where we're moving, the direction that we're kind of moving, or the opportunity that we have as a humanity to really move into a very beautiful state of being. And part of that is really being mindful of like walking the path of love, which y'all know I like to talk about a lot, because I really feel that it's the only path. We can walk down the path of fear, but look at where that's led us so far. And it's not a very pleasant existence, right? And I think we're seeing more the power of our frequency and energy and outlook and intention, actually. Intention is so incredibly powerful that, if you're interested in manifestation, intention is the seed, right? Without a pure intention and where the energy from which you're manifesting from, well, you can manifest all sorts of shit, but it might not be what you actually really want, right? So intention is really powerful, and so much more powerful and expansive than expectation, which always leads us to disappointment. So we're at a point in time as a humanity, as a collective, that is so incredibly powerful. And also very confronting, because we're healing a lot. We're being shown there's an opportunity for us to heal. And so part of that is we're being shown the shadow, both collectively and individually. And so what I see in my work over more than, 13 years of doing this is that a pervasive, I cannot tell you, I would say 99% of people's limiting beliefs are around not being good enough. Because in my opinion, belief, my observation, my studies is that we live in a world where we're not supported to be authentic individuals. We're not supported to be brilliant beings. We're, just constantly being told that we're not good enough, whether it's subliminal or otherwise. And, a society that pumps out fear and consumerism. And, now things are just going to a whole new bonkers level on social media with, AI images and, all of these avatars. And it's just, as I've been talking about it, this distraction is so profound, and it is so powerful in pulling us away from ourselves. It is not bringing us closer to ourselves. It is pulling us further and further away. So that's a bit of a tangent, but I want to come back to a very practical place to begin with, at least. So let's talk about victimization. Victimization has been a big archetype that every one of us, every single one of us, at one point or another, or many, many times throughout our life, have we fallen into that archetype. I don't think there's a single one of us that could say, no, I've never played the victim role or card. Or, it could be in the smallest of ways, of like you have a bad day and you're like, why does this shit always happen to me? Right? That's the victim. That's the victim. Life is happening to me. You're doing this to me. Everything is to me, and I'm powerless. That is the victim. And again, when I really believe that our environment affects our state of being. It is taken those of us that have been trying to walk this path aware and awake, especially these past 3 years, it takes so much self-discipline and so much self-care to continue to walk the path of love, to stay in heart, to be open-hearted and compassionate, because it's a mean world out there, folks. Like, I don't spend too much time on social media, but I was listening to a great live of this guy talking about how it's basically just become one big argument. Like, people aren't actually even listening to what you're sharing. They just want to argue about their point. It's become so divisive. And I don't want to go into that, but basically it's terrible. Like, it ain't nice, right? And I hope that more and more people are going, well, shit, this is a waste of energy. This is a waste of life force energy. This is a waste of my time on this planet. No matter what your beliefs are, whether you're spiritual or not, it's a bloody waste of time to just spend it arguing. But victimization feeds off of argument. It feeds off of having an enemy. It feeds off of, feeling like everything is happening to it, and needing to kind of fight back. And actually, as we're given this opportunity to become so much more attuned and so much more in the realization and the knowing that we are interconnected. And I don't just mean between human beings, I mean between all life and consciousness itself. I'd really recommend this talk. It was really beautiful. They were talking about the future of astrology, but it was really just this beautiful conversation. So you could, go, I'll post it somewhere on my social media and you can find the link there. But we have this opportunity to really recognize that we're part of a much greater tapestry. And I think when you do this personal work and you drop more into your heart and you understand more the embodiment and the feeling and the way of being, where you love yourself and you accept yourself and you don't judge yourself, you find yourself that if and when you ever judge other people or you gossip or you go into that kind of low level frequency, it feels shitty. It feels really shitty. Like, you might still do it. Like, we might have our moments, but it feels really bad. You're like, yeah, that doesn't feel good. And I think awareness, I know I've talked about this so much in my podcast. Awareness is really where we need to begin. As I cheesily said, it's the beginning of the alphabet. A, right? A for awareness, not A for apple. Yeah. So if, it all comes down to awareness. And when we can be aware that certain ways of being and certain behaviors are just, they don't feel good. Like, even being a victim, think about it. Like, you might have moments where you feel kind of righteous or vindicated or whatever it is, but does it actually feel good? Like, does it feel good to be also resentful or hating or upset? They say that, like, forgiveness is really for ourselves. That's really what forgiveness is about. And that takes time, right? It's all a process, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's to relieve ourselves of suffering. And I posted the other day, I said, there's the suffering that comes from an uncomfortable emotion. And then there's the added suffering of judging that emotion. And why are we why are we suffering unnecessarily, right? Like, just be with the emotion instead with as much love as possible. Don't judge your experience, because there's nothing wrong with your experience. Your judgment of your experience creates more pain and more suffering, which just isn't necessary. So getting out of victimization is what I talked about, I believe it was in my last podcast, of letting go. It's letting go of the narrative, because the victim really loves a good story. It's attached to its story, right? So recognizing the narrative, going back to this question, is this true? Is it true in this moment? Because a lot of the times the victim is playing out a story that is not in the present moment. It might be triggered by something that's happening in the present moment. Relationships are a perfect example of that, right? Your partner did something that triggers something that might have happened like 20 years ago. And often you could say couples come together to either their wounds attract each other, or you want to get to a point where your authentic self is what attracts somebody else. But if not, your wounds attract to someone else so you can work it through. But if you don't work it through, you're just like, boom, clanging up against, like head bashing that wound again. And it's there as an opportunity to really see it and then to work through it and heal it and pull out the thorn, as I've said many times before. But it's going to replay until we have awareness and bring it into conscious awareness and we're able to heal it. But we get very addicted to the story. And when two people in a couple are fighting and they're ping-ponging back and forth their shit, it's normally a story that is old, that's coming from the initial wound or from, that initial wound getting opened by, a relationship in the past that might have created pain and hurt and betrayal or whatever the story is. That's kind of how this works, right? And that's why communication is so important, because if you are in a relationship and you can communicate what's going on for you on a deeper level, you can work through it and you can heal it. And that's the amazing power of a relationship. But again, the journey has to start within, to understand even what's going on within us, to understand the language of our emotions and to understand what our wound even is and how we are behaving in the identity of it, I should say. So moving from victimization into self-responsibility is recognizing that we really are interconnected and that we really are at the helm or in the driver's seat of creating our reality. It's getting out of this paradigm. I would even say, and I don't want to offend anybody, I don't want to make this about any kind of religious perspective, because you could say this also in spirituality. You could also say this in kind of any kind of dynamic or system where you place the power outside of yourself, whether that's God or a guru or, some external authority that is going to tell you if you're good or bad or right or wrong. Are you doing it the right way? No, you're doing it the wrong way. Are you going to be praised? Are you going to be punished? Anything that takes you outside of yourself. And I think, I follow a bit of astrology, and as we're moving into this Aquarian age, it's really about, I think coming in, this is, it sounds almost like contradictory, but it's not the way that I will explain it. We're moving more into the understanding of the collective as one, but as a way to do that, you have to come back into yourself. So it's not about being individual so that you are separate, but it's actually coming into yourself and fully embodying yourself so that you realize you are connected to everything around you. Does that make sense? So when we recognize that actually we have a profound influence and effect on everything, like I've shared before, how I really love my relationship with my houseplants right now. And I talk to them and I name them and I see how much they grow. Like since I've been doing that again, I shared in a previous podcast that I used to do that in my 20s and then I kind of forgot that practice. And it's so beautiful. It's so amazing. So, we affect plants, we affect animals, we affect everything. Like we are consciousness. So there are no borders. And what Pam and Heather were talking about is that we're going to see this more, that there's kind of this borderlessness. And if you've ever had any kind of profound plant medicine experience, you feel that is just this kind of blending into the entirety of everything as one. And it's so beautiful. But again, bringing it back to the practical, getting out of this victimization and into self-responsibility also looks like I'm no longer going to blame the relationship. I'm no longer going to blame my partner. I'm no longer going to blame that person. I'm no longer even going to blame like what's happening in society, that politician, the government, that decree. It's getting out of blame and actually going, what do I need to do within myself to really tend to myself and take care of myself so that I feel empowered rather than being like in a state of power over someone, right? That's old paradigm patriarchal bullshit or whatever. I mean, that word gets thrown around a lot, so I didn't want to use it, but it's very different, right? It's not like a rigid power over something, but empowered is really like embodying your full self. And part of, we have to recognize that getting out of the archetypal kind of child and really growing into the adults that we are, that's really empowering. And part of that is taking self-responsibility. We are responsible for ourselves. We're responsible for the patterns that we get ourselves into. We're responsible for our relationships. We're responsible for anything and everything that happens to us. Really, at the end of the day, we are. And that's not to say that, like, if something bad happens to you, that you need to berate yourself and go, oh, I don't deserve that. Why did that happen to me? Again, that's the victim. That's the victim archetype. And this is where it's so bloody hard sometimes, because self-responsibility will make you really open your eyes and not like take things, how do I describe this? Like take the challenges and find the medicine in it. Find the lesson, find the gift. It's not about punishment. So equally, the opposite is not about praise. It's all an experience, and it's all there to teach us and show us more about ourselves and existence and relating to others. It's, as I've shared before, if you want to look at it from a spiritual perspective, where in the soul is coming to school to grow and to learn and to evolve. So it's also looking at our experiences in life and seeing that they're not here to punish us. They're here to, dare I use the word, enlighten us. And if I haven't shared this already, I'll share it again quickly now, that when I was about 21, 22, and I was going through panic attacks and just all sorts of stuff. I had left, I think I'd left the ballet at this point, and I was really asking myself this question of who am I without the identity of being a dancer? I was really looking into myself. It was the beginning of, I would say, where my spiritual path really, really deepened and widened and it got real. And I had this vision as I was working with this shamanic woman in hypnotherapy, that I was in child's pose, kneeling with my forehead on the ground, and I had shattered glass all around me. And I just knew from seeing it that all the shattered pieces of glass represented the suffering I had experienced in my life, all of the different memories that I remembered that were really painful, and that they were there to give me empathy so that I could understand even a little bit of somebody else's story of their pain and suffering. That there was something that it's like, oh, I had that experience and it gave me a window into what that's like. And so when I hear someone else that maybe has a similar story, I can go, yeah, I understand what that feels like. In my own way, right? We can't know 100% what it's like to be in somebody's body and in their being. But empathy is the bridge. Empathy is I have enough understanding, of my own pain and suffering to at least have love for yours. Right? And to create that bridge. And that's what we're so needing in this world. So moving into this kind of the other theme that I want to talk about, dropping out of the analytical mind and down into the heart. Heart is really where we can empathize. The brain, and we've been very conditioned to live in left brain, it can be very analytical, very critical, very linear, very black or white. And so moving into equilibrium, we used to live in a much more right-brained, and Heather and Pam also talk about this. So it re-inspired me to remember this conversation, and actually a lot of what I was writing in a book that I never published. Maybe I'll put it on a blog. But this movement from living primarily really just in the left brain, because if you look at right brain attributes, which right brain is feminine and left brain is masculine, again, non-gender based, our society really shames and shuns right brain aspects. But actually they're so necessary. Like a beautiful analogy that I think comes from indigenous culture. It's like a bird that's been flying in circles because it's just been flying with one wing. That's how we've been functioning as a society for a long, long time. And so we've been in the wing of the masculine, and with the rise of the divine feminine coming in, that's creating equilibrium, because now the bird can fly with two wings, and we need both wings. And when you have the loss of one, when you have the loss of the divine feminine, you also then have the loss of the divine masculine. Because what we're seeing now, I love this saying that it's like, we're not dealing with too much like toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is the absence of divine masculinity. And that is so powerful, because people are going, oh, we're too much in the masculine. Yes, but we're not in the divine masculine. Because one thing, I forget exactly what Pam and Heather were talking about, but it was something to do with heart and with presence. And I thought, in my mind, what came up that I wanted to speak to is, that is the perfect exemplification of the divine masculine and feminine. The divine masculine is presence. How many women out there really want their man to be present? Like a man that is in his presence, that just holds that space, is so fucking beautiful. It is such a turn on, because it makes the feminine feel safe. And when the feminine feels safe, she can open her heart, right? So the heart needs presence. And when there's presence, the heart can open and give love to that masculine presence. And that's where the beautiful union gets created. And so you can see that not just physically between a man and a woman, or between who embodies the masculine more and who embodies the feminine more, if you're in a same-sex couple. It also translates to how we are in our own mind and how we are in our own being. So this is the balance of left and right brain, right? And as we do that, then we get to drop really into our heart, which is the center of everything. Really, I believe the center, like think of your heart is kind of, I know it's not placed exactly in the center of your body, but from a chakra system, it's the center chakra. And when you're doing metta, which is a Buddhist practice of sending unconditional love to yourself and to all other sentient beings, you can kind of go out in concentric circles, and that you even love thy enemy, so to speak. It's this beautiful practice of loving kindness, basically. It always comes from the heart. And, Heather and Pam were talking about this, and they were talking about it more with sacred sites, but I remember in my 20s when I had done a couple week-long meditation retreats, and the energy that you would feel in this space after a week of sitting silently in meditation with a group of, 50, 70, 100 people, I don't remember exactly how much. It's palpable in the air, and it is so beautiful. And that's what happens when we drop into our heart and we open our heart. But what do we need to do in order to get there? We've got to find some kind of equilibrium in our mind, because when you're first sitting there, the mind will go crazy, right? And I think a big it's a big illusion or a misinterpretation of meditation is like no thoughts. You should have no thoughts. Like, no, that's not humanly possible. It's how you attach yourselves to those thoughts. It's how your thoughts run you rather than being observant of them. But really, like, where I wanted to deepen my practice was not to just keep it in the mind. It's not just about observation, but you do have to allow the mind to quiet, just to slow down. Your thoughts aren't going to shut off and go away. That's just like, we don't function that way. I remember someone saying in one of the Dharma talks that I think one of the greatest, Rinpoches, this was ages ago, 20 years. God, I'm getting older. This was like 20 years ago, saying that some Rinpoche, whatever, 11 seconds without thought. So do you get it? You know what I mean? And they meditate every single day, since they were tiny. So get away from that as the goal. That's not going to happen. The goal in my mind is to come into a state of presence, is to be mindfully, not just mindfully aware, but I like heartfully aware. Can I use that word? I'm going to use that word. Heartfully aware of your state of being. And then when you're aware of your state of being, you're not going, oh, well, that's good. Or no, that's bad. I like that. No, I don't like that. Like, you can be aware of that, but what if you can go to like, oh, this is just a state of being. This is just an experience. This is just an emotion. This is just a sensation without the judgment. Remember what I said in the beginning, the judgment is what creates greater discomfort, greater suffering, greater pain, greater sadness, greater whatever. It's the judgment, like letting go of that and really coming into a place of just holding, there's the masculine, holding the experience and then approaching that experience with heart. There's the feminine. So I feel like if this is what we can practice within ourselves, it becomes a natural choice to want to walk down the path of love. And then all the drama that's going out in the world right now, all of the fear-based trauma that they're putting out there, I hope people that are listening to this are starting to recognize it. Like, if you didn't catch it 20 years ago, if you didn't catch it 3 years ago, if you're not catching it now, like, there's still an invitation. Like, notice the drama. And notice the trauma response, and notice how that keeps society basically in like a PTSD state. Is that the choice you want to make? And I was thinking about this on my walk this morning. I always think micro, macro, right? So micro, if you were in a relationship with someone that was constantly creating drama after manipulated drama and who is narcissistic and just creating all this trauma response in you and creating so much stress and tension, would you stay in that relationship? Like, the answer is probably like, no, I'm not going to do that. So translate that to the world at large, and how society is run or certain systems are run. Would you still make that choice, right? This is a time to really come back home to ourselves. It's a time to let go of the victim and the bully. It's a time to let go of fear being the motivation for things and really, letting the analytical mind kind of like chill out a little bit so that we can create equilibrium between the hemispheres of our mind and to drop down into our heart and really embody love and walk the path of love and create the new world from a place of love. I always say the process is so damn simple. Like, it's very clear, right? There are a few steps. Anything that's so overcomplicated to get to a place of peace to me is like, I don't, like, could work, but I find the most potent things are the simplest. The challenge is always that it takes practice because we have been in a habit. We have been in a very, very bad habit of being incredibly self-critical, self-judging, mean, unloving, unsupportive of ourselves. And we're really needing to step into a time where we're going to be much more loving towards ourselves. And if we're more loving towards ourselves, we'll be more loving to our friends and our family and our plants and our pets and our neighbors and the people that we run into and everything. There's the concentric circles, right? So as within, so without. And we've got to really, that's where we got to take self-responsibility. In what way am I colluding with this paradigm that is shitty? It's not supporting anyone or anything, in my opinion. It's not supporting us as human beings. It's not supporting us as a community. It's not supporting our relationship to the planet. And that's a whole other thing that I could go into, is that as we drop more into our heart and we recognize that we're interconnected, we have a far greater appreciation for not just the planet and like, yes, let's take care of her and recycle and all of that. I mean, like going and convening with nature, listening to nature, that nature is constantly in communication with us. Animals are in communication with us. Trees are in communication with us. Then you go into this whole other realm, which to me makes life so magical. It's so beautiful. Go into your dream state, go into your, that kind of theta. I do theta healing, and you can go into that theta state. And there you're having an entirely different conversation with your environment and your existence and your higher self. And it's just like, from my perspective, and I'm just this type of person, I'm like, why would you not want to fucking do that? Because it makes life so damn beautiful and so magical. And I think that there is so much beauty to behold There's so much beauty to behold. But as Zach Bush was talking about on the Know Thyself podcast, that takes self-awareness. That takes self-awareness and absolute presence to then be, he was using the word overwhelmed by beauty. I think that was what Andre was saying. Overwhelmed by beauty requires presence and awareness, self-awareness. So it all comes back to like, come back to yourself. Come back to a state of awareness, and you get to make the choice. Do you want to stay? I'm post-migraine. I'm sorry, folks. I'm still trying to find my brain. Do you want to stay in a state of victimization, or do you want to move into self-responsibility and make the choice to drop into your heart and make the choice to walk the path of love? And you know what? Sometimes it's hard. It's really hard because it's really easy to get caught up in the drama. It's easy to get caught up in the arguments. Notice even how you interact with people in your life. How quickly do you get triggered and want to just snap at people? And a podcast that I was going to do last week that I'd like to do is, what if we tried to understand where other people are coming from? Again, that's tapping into the art of empathy, which is creating the bridge that connects us between ourselves and someone else, our experience and their experience. So these are all little seedlings. They're little seeds and seedlings that I'm dropping around. And as I always say, take it or leave it, as feels right for you. Go away and sit with it, think about it, feel it, most importantly. And yeah, I'm sure it will be to be continued, as it always is. All right, loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.